Hey, and welcome to the Solid Verbal. Now would be a perfect time to consider subscribing. Yeah, that little subscribe button for year-round premium college football content. That's it. Here's the video. Enjoy. Subscribe.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal. Boys and girls, my name is Ty Hildenbrand. Joining me over there, the one, the only, still the incomparable, albeit a little bit raspier than usual, Dan Rubenstein. We'll get into that momentarily. Welcome back to the show. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you have not done so already. Don't forget to tell your friends about our show if you have not done so already. It is week 6 that we are going to discuss here today on the podcast. A lot to get into, but first and foremost, Dan, how you feeling? How you doing over there?
A little bit hoarse with an A, still. It was getting better, and then we decided to do a live show and talk to our incredible listeners who came out in New York and then go to a bar. And about 3 minutes into our time at the bar, I said, I'm done talking, and I will mimic anything I have to say. Luckily, my voice has returned enough to do this show. Hopefully, I still think we're going to try to be a little bit quicker than usual with it, if that's okay with you. I'm sure it's okay with an overwhelming number of people who are just clamoring to themselves, this show needs more Ty. We need more Ty.
That's right.
But we're going to try to go shorter as I try to rest and recuperate the pipes.
Well, we welcome everybody back to the show. Thank you so much to everybody who came out for the New York gig. It was a ton of fun.
It was great.
Played a game show. Had a good time talking to the Verballerhood. We appreciate everybody's support. As ever here on the show, episodes driven by our good friends over at Geico. You can sign up to vote in our Verballer Top 10 poll, which is hot off the presses this morning, over at Verballers.com, our Patreon. Here is your new, quote-unquote new, Top 10. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Clemson remain unchanged 1 through 5. Tennessee has inched ahead of USC. We can talk about why here in a few moments. Oklahoma State standing pat at number 8. Ole Miss inching forward ahead of Penn State, I believe, to number 9, and Penn State to number 10. So with that being said, TCU, UCLA knocking on the door. We're very close to cracking into this top 10. We have definitely seen some tiers, T-I-E-R-S, start to emerge among the college football elite. We can get into that and much, much more. Dan, do you have any high-level takeaways? Any things that you noticed while you were watching Shania Saturday? I actually, as I was watching this, as I was going back through and doing the research, in retrospect, I think Second String Saturday may have been the more appropriate name, although not as fun as Shania Saturday.
Not as fun as Shania Saturday. Both with second string quarterbacks, we had a good concept, a good idea that they were going to be playing or starting, but then also guys going down. I don't think we fully knew the severity of what was going on with Malik Cunningham, obviously, and Will Levis. That was a later on in the week situation that unfolded, and all over the sport, really. Of course, Jason Bean coming in relief of Jalen Daniels in the TCU game for Kansas. So there was a healthy number of second string situations abound in the sport. So in terms of head, second string. Heart, always going to be Shania Saturday.
Yeah. And we had some folks calling in. You'll hear
Jalen Milroe, of course, Haynes King. There's across the board.
Yeah, you'll hear some folks here who called in and did their own impression of Shania Saturday, teams that did or didn't impress them all that much throughout the course of week 6. I don't know if there were any great surprises in terms of results. We had a few that we can get into here, but I think a lot of what we saw, a lot of what I'm going to take away from this week is really looking inside the box score, really looking inside of some of these specific games, beyond the result, any trends we may see emerging, what with Alabama, with Texas A&M, with teams like Wisconsin in an up for grabs Big West, A lot to discuss here on the Week 6 recap. Why don't we get started where we like to get started? Put our finger on the pulse of the Verballerhood with our Week 6 reverbs. Here we go.
I've been a Rutgers fan for long enough to know I am dead inside.
Are you?
Hey, Dan and Ty. This is Shiner Ryan.
This is Will in Minnesota.
This is Derek on the Nebraska Prairie. You know, it's kind of fun the day after Nebraska win to know I can sit back and think, okay, of all these coaches who are doing well, which one would be worth $7 million a year?
Man, Oklahoma.
that definitely don't impress me much.
To quote another Big Short character, Mark Baum, do you know how many points the Sooners scored today? 0!
I just watched my Longhorns hand a downtrodden Oklahoma team their worst shutout loss in school history, and all I can say is good.
Yes.
The balls have not been good since I've been an adult, and I don't really know what to do. Do I drink alcohol? Do I smoke a cigar?
Hey, Ty, it's me, TCU. I've been thinking about you a lot recently, and what we had. Give me a call. Hope you still have my number.
Looking at the Wisconsin Northwestern score and thinking maybe we should quarantine every team that's played Nebraska.
I would like to personally congratulate Offensive Coordinator Des Kitchings for turning what was a truly historic Virginia offense to one of the worst ones I have seen in my lifetime.
As a Virginia Tech fan watching that Pitt game, I wasted the first half trying to figure out how to pronounce their running back's last name, and only the second half realized it was pronounced Daddy.
It seems like Georgia Tech may have found Brent key to success. Go Jackets!
I spent the first half of today at an Edgar Allan Poe festival, and I still think the most unsettling thing I saw all day was Iowa's offense.
We get a four-way tournament for the buyout bowl with LSU, Michigan State, A&M, and Miami, and the winner gets out of their coach's contract. First and goal from the 2 with 3 seconds to go. The only two things you can't do is throw it short of the goal line or out of bounds. The Aggies do both.
That final play in the A&M Bama game was the worst thing that I've seen all day, and that includes seeing my kid vomit all over the floor earlier today.
Well,
Painful loss today for Auburn. Today we took a freshman in his first ever road game to play the defending national champions in Athens, and somehow we still didn't lose as badly as Oklahoma did.
Dan, Ty, you know what tastes good? Milk. And you know what tastes better? Knowing the fact that Boise State beat Fresno State again. Go Broncos!
UConn is on a 2-game winning streak. The last time that happened was in 2017. Additionally, that was before I met my wife.
Rowan Atkinson is going to be completely confused as to why Bean is trending.
Mr. Bean. We will talk about Mr. Jason Bean here momentarily. Thank you to one and all for dialing in to 408 Verbal 1. Thank you to our guy Shay for working deep into the night to get those put together. I thought a pretty good cross-section of where college football was at in week 6. I was glad to hear that there were other folks as appalled with A&M's final play call as I was. I don't know how you felt about that, but why don't we start with that Alabama-Texas A&M game? Because, as you know, on the preview show that we did, on the Spotify show that we did live from Spotify while we were both in New York on Thursday evening, we talked about CBS drawing the short straw with this game, how in the build-up to the season, what with Jimbo and Saban and all the steam on A&M with the recruiting stuff, how this appeared to be just an absolute showpiece of a game that anybody would be proud to have on their airwaves. And then we saw what A&M looked like through the first 5 weeks of the season and some of their strife that they've had, losing to App State and not looking good on offense and quarterback injuries and consternation over Jimbo Fisher. It didn't appear as if this was going to be a close game before they kicked the ball off because it was a 24-point spread. The final score here was Alabama 24, Texas A&M 20. So context, I think, is somewhat important here. Firstly, Bryce Young didn't play. Bryce Young didn't play. The defending Heisman champion did not play because of a shoulder injury. That meant we got to see more Jalen Milroe for Alabama. Haynes King was also the guy for A&M, probably will be for the foreseeable future after Max Johnson, it was announced, broke a bone in his hand last week. He's going to be done for the year. So we had I guess, kind of a dual backup situation of sorts. The takeaway for me in this game is that Bama could have lost and maybe should have lost because A&M had an opportunity. They drove 69 yards in the final 2 minutes here. They had a play from the 2-yard line after a pass interference call late in the game. 2 seconds left on the clock. well guarded by Bama. They tried to run one of those like down and out, like stop patterns right at the near pylon on the right-hand side, and Bama was all over it. Bama was just smothering the receiver, and so it didn't go for anything. They weren't able to get it into the end zone, but had they done it just 2 yards away, Dan,
yeah,
it would have been a much, much different set of reverbs that we received here on Sunday morning.
All is true. Yeah, it was one of those things where once it was Jalen Milroe and once it was clear that this was certainly his biggest stage that he's ever played on, and the turnovers, the fumbles, the going both ways, interceptions, that it was going to come down to something late because neither team was able to generate consistent rhythm on offense. Now, the youth of Texas A&M was quite impressive on both sides of the ball. Evan Stewart, of course, Moose Muhammad. The youth and guys stepping up for Alabama, or at least the new faces for Alabama. Like, I still remember game 1 for Georgia Tech, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
Thinking to myself, yep, he's different. He's special. And it's going to be interesting to see if he can make that difference for Georgia Tech specifically. Did at times, and it's just an embarrassment of riches to plug and play. Gibbs for Alabama, who once again shoulders the load and is a good reason. I mean, is probably the reason on offense Alabama wins this game, and obviously Will Anderson and the amount of pressure he put into the universe, but specifically the Texas A&M backfield, and Haynes King, the reason defensively Alabama was able to come through and get timely stops, weird special teams plays for both teams. But no, that final play, again, I'm going to go back. Every team needs to have an Excelsior. Every team needs to have that special card in their playbook. These are high leverage moments. These are where you do in these specific situations. And to count on that sort of 2-yard line comeback type out pattern.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that the best you can do? Obviously, I know there are progressions and there's good defense in play, but like, you have to give yourself more of an opportunity to make that play at the buzzer than A&M did. But at the same time, exciting, weird, sloppy, and good for CBS, because I think they only get one primetime game per year. They used it on this matchup last year, and it came down to the very end, and it was super exciting. And they got it this year, even without Bryce Young and without the results from A&M early on this season, to make this a true, like, oh, this could be a top 8 clash. Obviously, it wasn't that, but it was wire to wire, very watchable.
It was very watchable, and you alluded to the turnovers and the mistakes. 4 turnovers, to be exact, on the Alabama side. 2 fumbles and an interception from Jalen Milroe, and I think he's going to be good. I don't know to what extent he will see playing time after Bryce Young is gone. It's always
they got another guy too,
bit of a revolving door, at Alabama. Looked pretty green to me, definitely had flashes, is a hell of a runner.
Yes.
Big kid. Can certainly tote the rock, but we will see what it looks like for him moving forward. I'm assuming they're going to try and get Bryce Young healthy for the Tennessee game, which suddenly looks very interesting.
Huge.
And we could talk about that before the end of the show. But Alabama escapes at home 24-20. And on the A&M side, real quick, just to close the loop, as you know, I like to read blogs of the losing team often.
Oh, man.
And, well, no, I don't mean that as a pejorative, but it gives me good context for what's going on.
To the victors go the spoils, to the losers go Ty's journey into your web blog.
You get a click and maybe some banner traffic. I don't know.
That's true.
However it benefits you. But good bull hunting. Not good bill. That's, I guess, a different thing.
Good will hunting, yeah.
Brought up a good point. And they're like, yeah, we don't know if this team's any good. We have no idea. We have no idea if this team is good. The best players on the team, as you said, Dan, are all young, underclassmen. But the bad news is that the play calling still kind of sucks, and they still make way too many mistakes. So, honestly, the jury's still out, and I couldn't agree more. My inclination is to say that it's just a really bad offense. The
Wait, the jury's still out on A&M?
I think to some extent, yeah. If they've got performances like this in them.
I mean, good enough to hang with decent teams, but flawed enough that they can't get the job done despite promising young players on both sides of the ball. Do we think that might play out more often than not the rest of the year?
I think, yeah.
I don't think they're losing all of their games.
No, I don't.
I think they're a flawed offensive team that's talented on both sides of the ball, that has playmakers, that doesn't have structure and architecture to win big games.
I think if you're painting with a broad brush, yes.
Yeah.
What I don't know, and why I agree with the statement, I don't know how low the floor is. I don't know how low A&M can go.
It's as high as the mountains in Boone, North Carolina. Yeah.
Let's go over to the West Coast. UCLA 42, Utah 32, Dan. Now, like you, watched a lot of football on Saturday. I came away most impressed with UCLA for a couple reasons. First and foremost, Zach Charbonnet. Is he not fun to watch?
Oh, he's great.
He's
terrific.
He runs hard. He's got wiggle. He's got moves. He went for almost 200 yards in this game against a good Utah defense. The run defense, though, is that caveat for Utah. You don't want to throw against them. You certainly don't want to throw at Clark Phillips, which they tried. It didn't work in this game again.
At the end,
He had another pick six. But you can run against them. And the numbers show that. Not a horrible rush defense, but if you're going to attack the Utah defense, that's how you want to go at them. That was what the numbers told us in advance of week 6. UCLA tried it. It worked. It worked. I questioned before this game if UCLA would be physical enough to go toe-to-toe with a team like Utah to match up. They looked solid. They were not at all outclassed in this matchup. I thought UCLA definitely held their own when you've got Charbonnet playing as well as he did. And then when you layer on top of it the fact that DTR is playing at the highest level of his career.
Mm-hmm.
I know you said on Twitter about, well, he's a fifth-year guy.
He's almost 23.
Yeah. Maybe he's an aspiring businessman.
He should be good at 23.
Right.
And having started games, I think he started 5 games one year, but otherwise has started like 10, 11, 12 games for UCLA for 4 other years. Yeah.
But there is a difference between, you should be good and actually doing it. And that has been a thing for DTR over the last couple seasons. We can all see the prospect of talent. It's just been very inconsistent. He was not inconsistent in this game. He was very good. 18 to 23, 4 touchdowns. If he can stay this consistently good, and that's a big if, they can win the Pac-12, right?
Sure. Yeah. We talked a little bit about this, that Utah getting those pick sixes against Oregon State, I believe it was against Oregon State, is great. But looking at the number 42, which is how many points they scored against the Beavs, it was not necessarily indicative of how overwhelming their offense was with the pick sixes or the short fields. So I am interested in Utah moving forward as a good team in the Pac-12. I am supremely interested, both because I enjoy Pac-12 football and also because after bye week, UCLA travels to Oregon to take on the Ducks in what exactly UCLA can be, because they helped to force Utah into a slow start in this game. They came up with big stops, both, in the sort of between the 20s, but also in the red zone. I think their interception on Cam Rising, he threw into the sort of teeth of a UCLA cover 2 that was deep in UCLA territory, and they come up with that play there. Yeah. They come up with a fumble return to the goal line, so they force mistakes. And the big thing is, Utah's a terrific team when they can dictate games with their style of play. And their style of play is a lot of winning in the trenches and a lot of possession of the ball, slowly wearing you down, putting up points. What they don't do is they don't generate big plays, especially without their most talented pass catcher who's out for the year in Brant Kuithe. So what they rely on is needing a number of plays to march downfield. And college teams, even good ones, that need a lot of plays to get downfield are more prone to penalties and turnovers and mental mistakes because it's just college football. And so UCLA was able to generate those big plays. You saw them picking on specific Utah players, finding the edge, beating Utah to the edge in the run game, going downfield with DTR. I don't know if you remember when they were backed up. I think they hit a tight end on a little bit of a wheel route up the sideline. They are just a more advanced offensive program. And they had one of the best, 10 offenses in the country last year, and they go 8-4. It's just UCLA, and it's just going to be a little bit quieter in the Rose Bowl for these types of situations. But I don't think this is a referendum necessarily on what Utah is or isn't, big picture, because there's still a lot of big games left for the Utes. But we also talked about this preseason, it's not an easy schedule, and this is the first year in which Utah is the hunted, right? They're not just like the sleeper near the top of the conference that can win the conference. They're the clear favorite. And to go to UCLA, to go to Florida against, I don't know what kind of quality team Florida is, but they pulled it out yesterday, It's tough. That's all it is. It's tough to go through unscathed, and UCLA is the story here, especially on defense to me, because that was the question going into the year with hiring a new defensive coordinator and allowing what they did, especially in the passing game last year. How would they rebound? And they've had some low moments this year, but beating Washington and now beating Utah in the Rose Bowl like they did. And I don't think they've had a true challenging road game, so going to Autzen is going to be very difficult. But they are in the top tier of this conference officially right now, and it's only a good thing that we can now say Oregon, UCLA, Utah, and USC all make sense grouped together.
Yeah, I mean, again, I reiterate what I said at the top. I was impressed by the physical nature with which UCLA played this football game. We saw flashes of that last year. They were too inconsistent last year. Yeah. Very good on offense, but I remember that opening week game when they played LSU a year ago. We were like, wow, they look strong in this game. They look really good.
But we didn't know LSU was in the midst of completely collapse.
We didn't, which is why context is important.
Yeah.
Right. And so
it's also just, you can't be a top 10 team in 2022 and say we're a pickleball squad. And there's some pickle into Utah. Well, and that's tough.
Let's go to a team that is not playing pickleball, and that's TCU.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
TCU is not playing pickleball. Not at all. TCU is telling everybody, go deep, we're throwing the bomb every play.
Sure.
TCU beats Kansas in a game that was fun as hell, 38-31. It ended up being a shootout. I'm not going to play the sound. I don't have it on me. But it didn't start out that way. It was 10-3 at half in favor of the Horned Frogs. The big story in this game, if you take anything away from this, was that Jalen Daniels got hurt for Kansas. He went down on his right shoulder in the second quarter. The backup, Jason Bean, came in and was absolute freaking nails in this football game. He had 4 touchdown throws. A lot of tweets about Mr. Bean floating around the Twitter sphere.
Of course.
A lot of Mr. Bean out there on Saturday afternoon. He did his job admirably. It was not enough to get the job done because TCU was also good. Max Duggan was also absolute freaking nails for TCU. And talk about having a renaissance season. My gosh, Max Duggan coming into his own now under Sonny Dykes in a very short period of time now that they've been together at TCU. Nobody had a better day than Quentin Johnson, though.
Just a monster.
Quentin Johnson, the receiver, the big receiver for TCU, 14 catches, 206 yards, and a touchdown. So, at least for the moment, the undefeated dream for Kansas dies here in Lawrence with game day in town.
You don't have to go to Lawrence. We made a bet during the live show that if Kansas were 9-0, 8-0,
9-0
to start the year, you would head with or without the solid wife Kate for a game in Lawrence.
I can't tell you how many family members asked me, "Were you serious about going to Lawrence, Kansas?" And I said yes, but I felt like something like this was coming.
Yeah.
Vegas had this point spread nailed. It was 7. And so, it factored in, I think, about as much as anybody could have expected with 2 offenses that are pretty good. In the end, though, it is TCU. I think, as we mentioned on the preview show, a little bit more of a finished product. Got the job done a little bit more in the margins and ends up winning by just 1 score. Great win for them. By the way, they are knocking on the door of a Verballer top 10. I think TCU is now opening some eyes. They've got some big games still to play on their schedule, but definitely making it worth their money to get rid of Gary Patterson and bring in Sonny Dykes so far.
Yeah, sometimes it's just Max Duggan was wearing purple, and the Kansas quarterbacks were both really good. Jalen Daniels, is a really good quarterback, and of course Jason Bean stepping in relief was very, very good. Threw some absolute dimes, by the way.
Oh yeah,
absolute just nails, as that's your phrase, your Lenny Dykstra phrase of the morning. But to me, it's when you have what's my phrasing here? When you have a receiver who changes the complexion and calculus of what you have to do on defense, not just during the regular season, but in December, January, you are a winter wonder. And that's exactly, if we can see it more often, the upside of Quentin Johnston is, he's a problem. And he's going to be a problem for literally everybody in the Big 12 when he shows up and he's locked in and this offense is humming. And so that's the difference, is Kansas doesn't necessarily have a go-to number 1 standout like Quentin Johnston. Again, there have been games where Quentin Johnston goes for 2 catches, 28 yards.
Sure.
But when it is sensed that he is unstoppable, what are you supposed to do? It's a Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's type game, and TCU and Sonny Dykes are very well aware that you get the ball to your star power. Kendre Miller was very good on the ground. They were balanced, and TCU appears to be, because I considered Kansas to be for real, TCU's for real. And
TCU is for real. They are very, very much for real. By the way, bye week next week, then they got Oklahoma State at home.
It's great.
October the 15th, which figures to be a really big matchup, a huge matchup in the Big 12.
A lot of baggage between those. Also underscores the fact that I don't necessarily believe, and I have no idea how to define the best conference, but top to bottom, the Big 12 is the most top to bottom conference. Right?
The Big 12 is most top to bottom. The Big 12, I think, is the most interesting.
Sure.
It's the most interesting because there is so much, I think, just room to grow if you're a team. If you're Texas Tech, it's still kind of there for you. Like it's a really wide open conference, which makes it fun as hell.
Yeah, it's some combination of teams that do at least one specific thing well, to scary at times, to looking pretty complete. And the weak link is what? Like Texas Tech's defense, Iowa State's offense, but these are still teams that are competent enough to scare everyone pretty much. Now, we should talk Texas Oklahoma, because there is a team involved in that matchup that you can't point to doing one specific thing well.
Yeah. By the way, it may not be there for Texas Tech, but just as a point.
I mean, they've already beaten Texas, though, right?
As an
so
interesting
there's already
point of
a resume item. Yeah.
Point of reference. You mentioned the Texas thing. Oh, my gosh. Texas wins 49-0. 49 zip. 49 zilch over Oklahoma. Dylan Gabriel did not play. He had the head injury. We talked about it on the preview. Davis Bevel, the Pitt transfer, got the start. He was 6 of 12 for 38 yards and a pick. Not good. The offense gained 195 yards. Obviously very limited. Obviously not very good. Who would have thunk we'd be sitting here talking to you on October the 9th now, 2022, talking about how Kansas has better quarterback depth than Oklahoma. Not me. Did not expect that twist. But all that being said,
guess who just got
holy crap, Dan. This is the worst shutout loss in the history of Oklahoma football. It eclipsed a 47-0 shutout that occurred back in 1945. So it's been a minute since we saw a loss quite like this. Texas had almost 600 yards. Quinn Ewers did come back. He threw 4 touchdown passes. Bijan Robinson, 130 and 2 touchdowns. Oklahoma just never had a shot. They never had a shot. And I know we're going to look at the score and we're going to say, wow, they couldn't stop Oklahoma, or they couldn't stop Texas, and what's wrong with the Oklahoma defense? We should talk for a minute about the fact that Oklahoma did not score at all, even with backups, against the Texas defense that we have not been talking about as a particularly good defense this college football season.
Correct.
Is that a fair statement by you? By me?
It's been up and down. I think there are a lot of underlying things about, I think they've tackled better. I think they have lined up and have been more organized better over the course of the season, but the results haven't always been there. But I think some very specific things that Texas has done points to the fact that they are improving on defense, right? Look, you can look across the field to see a team that hasn't improved on defense. Now, they're put in a tough spot, as you mentioned. No Dylan Gabriel, the offense able to generate precisely nothing. Also, a bit of an askance view of Oklahoma at the top of the show saying, nothing too surprising. 49-0 Texas. Not surprising. Thanks for that, Oklahoma.
It wasn't surprising that Texas won, but certainly within this game, the manner in which Oklahoma lost, that was surprising. Did not expect that.
They tried to do different stuff. And that different stuff included Eric Gray throwing a jump pass for a horrific interception, which he was so stunned and ashamed mid-play, he just put his hands over his head and his helmet.
I tweeted it out. It looked like he was shooting a jumper, a foul shot.
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough. No, an incredible performance from Texas across the board. Jatavian Sanders continuing to emerge, Xavier Worthy, like all these guys stepping up, Bijan Robinson, Roshan Johnson. It was just wall-to-wall fun for the Texas Longhorns against Oklahoma in a year in which we were subjected to, it's not crazy to say Brent Venables is an upgrade. Well, 0 points later, Let's give it some time.
Yeah.
But that is, it's easy to say that was rock bottom. But is it?
Yeah.
Like, rock bottom is not letting this year's iteration of Texas's offense, when Quinn Ewers starts, score a bunch of points. It's somebody else scoring a bunch of points that perhaps shouldn't. So we'll see. It's an uphill climb. I'm positive Brent Venables and the Oklahoma staff and recruiting department will fill this roster with an incredible amount of talent, and that we're in the midst of a low point. The question is, what does the ceiling look like at this point? When Dylan Gabriel's a short-term answer and fix at quarterback, what does it look like bringing in quarterbacks and defensive scheme and defensive coaches? Like, the expectation is Oklahoma competes near the top, at the top of the SEC long-term. That's the expectation, which is totally fair. This is a playoff caliber program. At least it has been in the Big 12. And so I just think the volume, we're ticking the knob up a little bit on what is Oklahoma going to be under Brent Venables. We're just ticking that volume up a little bit. That's all.
Just turning it up a notch. You joked about, it's not my joke. Maybe the SEC puts together sort of like an Arizona Fall League, a developmental
league.
Something that something that Oklahoma can play in before they get promoted into the SEC.
Just to get some rhythms, right? Some training wheels.
Yeah.
As you prepare to enter that next phase of a league for your program. Yeah.
But by the way, the Texas schedule from this point forward, now they're on a bye week next week as well, but their final 6 games open up a lot of possibilities for the Longhorns. They already have 2 losses. They're 4-2. They lost to Texas Tech and, of course, Alabama back in week 2 by 1.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of Iowa State, they've got Oklahoma State on the road, Kansas State on the road, TCU at home, Kansas on the road. They close out the season back home with Baylor. So that's a rough 5-week stretch.
Sure.
For the Longhorns. And I suspect before long we'll find out a lot about what they're truly made out of. Quinn Ewers back now. It was good to see him out there healthy. He looks pretty good. I mean, he's got it.
Really good.
He looks really, really good. So as long as he can stay healthy, and if the defense can continue making some strides, I'm excited to see what this team's stealing is as well.
I can't wait. Whether it's this year, whether it's next year, there is going to be a conversation of, so I guess we got to pay Sark $93 million. Like, again, I don't know if it's this year or next year where they go 9-3 regular season, 10-3 with a bowl win, 10-2, and then it goes to 11-2. And like, I guess we have to pay him all of the money. And maybe it'll turn out to be an unbelievably shrewd and smart decision. And they continue this momentum in the SEC. But also, there's going to be a series of dice that are about to be rolled if these types of results continue.
Is there a world in which Texas, let's say, goes 9-3 and looks promising on offense? A&M gets impatient and fires Jimbo Fisher, paying him $95 million, whatever his buyout is.
Right.
And A&M tries to make a play for Steve Sarkisian.
Probably not. That's too far. There's more pride in College Station than to go after the Texas quarterback or Texas head coach. But I like where your brain is at, Ty. I do.
Let's round things off in the Big 12 here. Let me zoom through these results, Dan, and then you can react accordingly. We had Oklahoma State 41-31 over Texas Tech. Shout out to Baron Morton, the 4-star redshirt freshman who got the nod for Tech after Donovan Smith banged up his shoulder and didn't play. I guess he played a little bit, but threw it 62 times. And I thought it looked really good. Good. He wasn't perfect.
A lot of short stuff.
Yeah, a lot of short stuff. He wasn't perfect. He had a bad pick. He had a bit of a knee thing going on, so he's a little bit hobbled, but I thought all told a pretty impressive showing for his first start against a team like Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
The TLDR version of this game is basically that Oklahoma State cleaned up its defense after half, and then they just kept hammering Texas Tech's defense until they broke. And eventually they did. Eventually they did. So nice win for Oklahoma State. I thought a good effort from Texas Tech, albeit with a backup quarterback who looked very promising. When Tyler Shuck comes back and Donovan Smith comes back, I saw a lot of speculation out there on the blogs this morning about a 3-way quarterback race, which never works out well, but throw another name in that hat. The Pokes, by the way, have a bye next week. Then they have a run of a road game against TCU, which I alluded to earlier. They also play Texas. They're on the road at K-State and on the road at Kansas. So things are going to heat up here over the next month or so in the Big 12. I mentioned K-State. Kind of wish I didn't.
Okay.
10-9 was the score in Farmageddon. More Armageddon than Farmageddon, let's say, at least on the offensive side. It wasn't so much that this was a bad offensive game. This was a defensive slugfest. This was a defensive slugfest because teams were able to get yards, but defenses really stepped up. Neither could get its running game going at all. Both teams struggled in that regard. Both teams struggled mightily on third downs as well. Just big old punt fest, right? Big old punt fest. For the third straight week, though, a good game for Renaissance man, the original, the OG Renaissance man, Adrian Martinez.
Sure.
Who was, again, the best player on the field. K-State was favored by 1 at kickoff, which was a bit of a bad beat for those of us who had K-State -1 in this contest. But big win for K-State. I don't know. Going on the road, rivalry game. We had Oklahoma State and Kansas State winning their matchups to round out the Big 12, Dan. Any reaction?
Great win for K-State. You nailed everything, and it's one of those things where K-State fans specifically for the past 2 or 3 years have been insistent we have good receivers. Just trust us. We have good receivers. We just don't always find ways. And, Skylar Thompson's hurt, and it's Will Howard, and it's Adrian Martinez struggling early on. Just like, let's get them the ball. And K-State did. Now, they weren't finishing drives, obviously. You had the long touchdown. Was it to Phillip Brooks? Early on in the game. And look, you're right. It was defense. It was making these quarterbacks win. And if you are going to force Iowa State to generate explosive plays to win a game, you're probably going to beat Iowa State because this offense is, just in terms of stressing out defenses, pretty horrific and have been for a little while. Like, again, they're one of those teams that they think that pickleball gives them the best chance to win games. They're not necessarily wrong with how much Matt Campbell has won in Ames. But once again, we need, and we'll get into, I'm sure, the Big Ten next or wherever we're going next, if we want to stay talking about the state of Iowa, there's not a lot of offense happening in that state. And it's a shame because I like Xavier Hutchinson. I like those the tight ends last year. But no, this is not an offense that is built to stress teams out downfield, and it'll continue to lose them these types of games like they had last week, like they had this week.
Yeah, if you want to stay in the great state of Iowa, we could talk about the Illinois-Iowa game. The state of Iowa, by the way, on the FBS level, had 15 points and 5 field goals yesterday worth of college football offense.
Spicy.
Yep, 9-6 again. Illinois knocks off Iowa. I kind of feel like the Brian Ferentz thing isn't working. It just hasn't clicked yet.
Got to give him 5-6 more years. Did you see what? So, okay, Illinois wins this game quite impressively. Tommy DeVito goes down. Art Sikowski doesn't do all that much. Chase Brown, very good. Iowa's offense, pretty terrible. Not pretty terrible, full-on terrible, but Illinois' defense, also very, very good. Like, you understand how this game ended up at 9-6.
Of course.
Without having watched every snap, which I did not. I zoomed through this game pretty quickly because why would you watch a game like this in detail unless you're an Illinois or Iowa fan?
Right.
Let me take that back. Why would you watch a game like this in detail unless you're an Illinois fan? You should know better by now if you're a Hawkeye. You should absolutely know better. After the game, Kirk Ferentz was like, we won 10 games last year. Not sure if you reporters saw that. You did it without an offense. And to go into another season saying, I think let's just keep doing what we're doing with a terrible offense, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And guess what? It has. It absolutely has. Watching Iowa try to offense is like biting into a burrito and getting more tortillas in there. Yes, it's technically a burrito, but you wrapped a tortilla around a bunch of crumpled up tortillas and you're calling it spicy. Stop it. Stop it. You are failing college football. You are failing your own fans. You're failing the Big Ten. You're failing television networks. You're failing all of us. Stop it. Step aside and move on.
Thank you. Thank you for coming over to my side. I said after week
awful.
2.
I know.
Get out of there, man.
I have a softer heart than you do, that I can say sometimes it takes some time to figure stuff out, what you can and can't do. But the stubbornness and honestly selfishness that it has to be my way. It has to be my way.
It's brutal.
look, I have no stakes in Iowa football. My only stakes are my only dreams and wishes for Iowa football is my dreams and wishes for every program. Just be entertaining for your own fans, for everybody. And Iowa's just not. They're awful.
Yeah, the viral tweet of the day was from Shahan Jayaraja from CBS Sports.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
And he said, if I read this correctly, Iowa punted from their own 16, recovered a muffed punt at the Illinois 35, went 3 plays for -6 yards and punted, forced a fumble and recovered at the 5, went 4 plays for -4 yards and kicked a field goal, which in effect is a 15-play, -10, 76 punt yard field goal drive.
Yeah.
For the Iowa Hawkeyes. That's how they scored 3 of their 6 points. I feel bad for Iowa people. We had a lot of them come out to our Chicago show, more than we expected. And, nobody's under illusions that Iowa's winning a national championship or anything like that. They just want to see competent football. It's not unlike what we've heard from Nebraska people who have tempered expectations to a point, but know that there's more to be had. So at some point, something's got to break here. I know there is deep respect for Kirk Ferentz and what he has done at Iowa, but in a world in which Paul Chryst is getting fired after week 5, a Wisconsin lifer, by all accounts, I wonder to what end there's been a sea change, if at all, within the Iowa administration. I would be surprised if we didn't hear more about that in the coming weeks.
I mean, Kirk Ferentz is the governor of the state, right? Paul Chryst has been there since 2015, was a lifer, is from Wisconsin.
I get it.
Assistant at Wisconsin, is a Barry Alvarez guy. But Kirk Ferentz is a whole different level.
I know, but the crowds are fickle, Dan.
I guess. I don't know, man. It'll if it continues apace, it probably won't happen this year. But at least it gets the conversation going about what are we doing with this human who refuses to adjust and change. And I don't know. He
doubled down on it. He named his son offensive coordinator.
Right. The story here, though, really, Illinois is 5-1, are they not?
Yeah. This is a great win for Illinois.
Somebody's going to hire Ryan Walters. I don't know, a bigger program to run their defense or to be a head coach at a smaller program. But he's done a terrific job. That more and more looks like a great hire of Brett Bielema hiring him away from Mizzou. Even going back into late last year, Illinois' defense has been strong to quite strong. And look, yes, it's the Iowa offense. All that is fair to report back on the Illinois defensive performance. But this is what a good team should do against Iowa's offense. And Illinois is a full-on, interesting, good team. They had the weird week against Indiana, who we can get into shortly. But a great story. A great story with what Bird has done in so little time, by the way, in Champaign.
All right, let's move. We got to talk about all things Big Ten here very quickly.
All right, let's go.
Wisconsin wins big over Northwestern. At long last, I get another 5-touchdown game out of Graham Mertz that I can reference as opposed.
He was good last year. He was good last year against Northwestern. It doesn't matter. You are banned, by the way. In the way that we retired dudes, we were like, look, Jonathan Taylor, tailback, is just going to be a dude every week. We're not going to mention him in the Dude Alert segment. You can never, ever, ever. Now, you have final edit on the audio, so I can't really with authority say this.
I will abide by the honor system.
The 2020 Illinois-Wisconsin game, I'll cut it out of all videos anytime you mention it because I handle that. I want people to shame you. It's banned. It's a full ban on any reference to that game and Graham Mertz's performance.
Fair enough. 42-7, big win for Wisconsin. We had Ohio State, 49-20 over Michigan State. C.J. Stroud, big game. Mecca Igbuka. We had Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, all with monster games. Trey Henderson played, went for 118 and a touchdown. No JSN, still nursing the hammy. As I said to you this morning, there is a world in which Michigan State goes 2-10. They do not look good. But
who is their most winnable game moving forward?
Probably Rutgers. Probably Rutgers.
Rutgers and East Lansing. Indiana's and East Lansing. Indiana's offensive line and the Michigan State defense are sort of operating on the same wavelength here.
Yeah. Well, Indiana, for their part, lost 31-10 to Michigan. Scary moment in this Michigan game, by the way. First quarter, after a couple drives, run game coordinator Mike Hart, native son of Michigan, Mike Hart, collapsed on the sideline, had a seizure, needed to be carted off the field. I have not heard much on his status. Hope he's okay. He's stable. Okay.
I saw stable condition. Yeah.
That's good news. I have to believe that the Michigan team was shaken after that ordeal. I think that explains at least a bit of their slow start on offense. I mean, it's just a scary thing for anybody who's witnessed it. It's not fun. So hope he's doing well. Michigan did rebound. It was tied at half, but they scored 21 unanswered to close out this game. Obviously, big game next week that we'll get into when we do our preview show with Penn State coming to town. We had Purdue. Purdue wins over Maryland. Maryland scored a touchdown with 35 seconds left. They needed a 2-pointer to tie it up, but it did not convert. Felt like this one got away from Maryland. They had chances. Purdue had a bunch of turnovers. Maryland couldn't do anything with them. Second week in a row now for Purdue on the flip side that they have won on the road. The Big Ten West being up for grabs as it is. Don't count Purdue out. Don't count Purdue out.
Yeah, we're 4-2. And their losses were super competitive, were they not?
Super competitive. So
against decent, what we perceive now in Syracuse and Penn State, if I'm not mistaken, these are pretty good teams.
Two ranked teams.
So Purdue's a good team. I don't know if you saw the specifics in the end of this game, but an offensive lineman blocking too far downfield on the 2-point conversion that would have tied it, and then they have another shot at a 2-point conversion, move back, and they're unable to execute and get those 2 points on that final play. So Purdue holds on the road, which is, again, win your clunkers, a bright, shining example of winning your clunkers. As far as Ohio State, Michigan State, obviously the negatives are quite apparent with Michigan State. I think we can take 10 to 14 seconds to fawn over Marvin Harrison Jr. And this passing game. And if there's any concern at this point with Ohio State is just they're thin at corner with injury stuff. And I don't know who makes them pay ultimately. If Sean Clifford is licking his lips unnecessarily, I don't know who, if Michigan, who they themselves, the story was Michigan's defense more than anything against Indiana. The adjustments that they made. It was 17-10 in the fourth quarter, was it not? Yep. Against Indiana? Look, finish strong, win your clunkers. Michigan did all of those things. I thought J.J. McCarthy was good. Threw his first pick, I believe, on a tip ball in the end zone. Blake Corum made a big play early on. The offense was actually pretty stagnant in this game. Indiana did a good job tackling. They did a good job reading things from Michigan. And again, good finish from Michigan. Not a ton to read into this, and it was in Bloomington, was it not?
It was, yeah.
Okay. Michigan's a really good team. Their excellence to me is still up for debate. But a really, really good team, and they can continue to improve over the course of the season. They have Penn State next week, do they not?
They have Penn State next week. The only other matchup here in the Big Ten to call out, and this one happened during our live show. People were yelling out the score.
Yeah.
Rutgers at Nebraska. Nebraska won 14-13 after Casey Thompson threw 2 touchdown passes in the second half to erase a 13-0 deficit as the Huskers win on the road. Let's go over to the SEC, Dan.
Yeah.
You rifle through some of these results here. We had Tennessee 40-13 over LSU. Georgia 42-10 over Auburn. South Carolina knocks off Kentucky. Kentucky playing with Kaya Sharon, their backup quarterback, after Will Levis had a boot on his foot. Mississippi State 40-17 over Arkansas. Just destroyed Arkansas. Hogs were without KJ Jefferson. We had Ole Miss trailed at half against Vandy, but then came out firing, ended up winning 52-28. And we had Florida. Florida won mostly with defense over Mizzou. Anthony Richardson, 66 yards passing, and another turnover for the 5th straight game. But nonetheless, they get the dub. And Mizzou, tough break for Mizzou again. They're kind of close every week, 2-4 on the season with a bunch of close losses. So I think the big story here is Tennessee, especially going into next week with the Bama game on deck. Bama traveling to Knoxville to play in the big rivalry game. Tennessee just destroyed LSU, Dan. Even without Cedric Tillman out wide, they were also without their left tackle. This game was never close nor in doubt. You loved Tennessee here. This is a game you felt very strongly about. I didn't take them because I was spooked by the point spread, but Tennessee did not show any weakness here. None whatsoever. I thought, knowing that this was a potential look-ahead spot, with Alabama coming to town, everybody's going to have their focus on that game, big rivalry game, right? It did not show. I mean, they were focused. They were operating at a really high efficiency and just seemingly firing on all cylinders. So if you're Bama, clearly you take notice of that. If you're a college football fan, and if you're looking at Alabama, as I think you and I have over the last couple weeks, and my takeaway on the Bama thing is like Bama's really good. Bama deserves to be a top 3 team. They're probably going to be one of the contenders for the national championship, at a minimum the playoff. Like that much is already kind of baked into the cake. I don't think Bama's as good as they were last year. I don't think Georgia's as good as they were last year.
Right.
And so when you see a team like Tennessee rising up and playing at this high of a level, I'm not sitting here saying Tennessee's beating either of those teams, but it does make the conversation a little bit more interesting knowing how well they're playing, at least on the offensive side of the ball right now.
Tennessee's a really good team. Tennessee's really, really good. I'd like to see them and how they react. Look, they've played Florida. They've actually played a pretty impressive schedule thus far. Having played Pitt, Florida, and now LSU. Like, we have quality data on Tennessee just based on their results. And to do what they did without what I believe to be their best receiver in Cedric Tillman, Brew McCoy, the USC guy, the USC transfer, steps up and has been stepping up. He was a former 5-star, and there was obviously a strange, albeit unfortunate situation at USC. Not for him necessarily. But I don't know, man. Tennessee has guys on this offense. They made plays on defense. And now LSU has its own host of issues and couldn't get things going and couldn't finish drives. And, credit Tennessee's defense there. Tennessee needs to clean up the penalties a little bit. I don't know. They had 10 or 12 penalties here. So can't be giving free yards to Alabama. But is this the biggest game in Neyland in the last decade?
It might be.
15 years coming up here? I mean, there have been big games, but the expectations for Tennessee have been largely unfounded to me until this point when Hendon Hooker has firmly established himself as a Heisman caliber quarterback. Like, any conversation about the Heisman that does not include Hendon Hooker, which I've said before, is invalid. He is really, really strong. And when you have a guy like that, isn't that a Chris Collinsworth thing? When you have a guy like this, I don't know if it's Jack Collinsworth or Chris Collinsworth, gives you a chance against everybody, right? There's no defense for the perfect pass, of which Hendon Hooker had at least one. I don't know if you saw the deep touchdown pass.
I saw it.
That was just like a gift from the college football gods dropping out of the sky. It was beautiful. So, yeah, came away. This is the type of game Tennessee would lose under previous promising years, and left no doubt here. So impressed.
I am going to, so often when we do our preview shows, you see Alabama, and it's almost just like a reflex. You're picking Alabama to win.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take some extra time to think about this Tennessee game. I'm not sure which direction I'm going. There's a lot of home dog in this game next week, and especially knowing that they're not doing the look ahead thing. I don't know. That's just
there's a literal home dog on the field in this game. Smokey,
literal home dog.
Come on.
Yep. All right. I mentioned the Georgia game.
I'm just preparing the meat.
That tenderizes it.
That tenderizes it in a big way.
That was loud.
Yeah.
Just 14-0 at half. This is the Deep South's oldest crock potting, Dan. Georgia ran it up in the second half. Nothing really that much to report here. Of course, mentioned the South Carolina game. Mississippi State, by the way, let's talk about them real quick and then move on to the ACC. Mississippi State also destroyed Arkansas, much the same way Tennessee destroyed LSU. Arkansas was playing with Malik Hornsby, who definitely showed flashes as the backup quarterback. They were able to move the ball, but most of it after the game was over.
Correct.
Most of it after the game was over. Mississippi State was up 21-0 in the second quarter and just sort of cruised. So the game next week for Mississippi State is at Kentucky. I don't know what the status of Will Levis will be. That's a very interesting matchup if Will Levis plays. If he doesn't play, you have to love Mississippi State's chances because they're another team. They're another team that I know you're really high on. I feel like Mississippi State over the last 3 weeks has taken their game to a new level. It feels like they're another one operating just full efficiency, full throttle, all systems go. You really have to like the way that this team looks right now.
Yeah, but also confuses you as to how they lost to LSU. I guess they had like one bad quarter and a half or something like that. But yeah, they've been very, very good. They were efficient. Will Rogers did he set like the completions record or something in the SEC, which is not surprising given the offense in which he operates. But Mississippi State, the receivers that have been developed in Starkville and Mike Leach's short time there have been great. And look, they're beating flawed teams, and that's what really good teams tend to do. And Arkansas, without KJ Jefferson, without a deep threat, without really having improved much against the deep pass, is a flawed team. And Mississippi State took care of business in a way that really good teams tend to do. So the back half of State's schedule becomes more and more fascinating.
All right.
Any other games that you want to talk about in the SEC? I mean, no Will Levis meant South Carolina just kind of ran the hell out of the ball against Kentucky.
Their first win, by the way, over a ranked team since 2020. And South Carolina now a very quiet 4-2. I don't know if they're winning the SEC East per se, but
no,
playing well enough to win, right?
Vandy up 20-17 at the half against Ole Miss. Whether it was turnovers or sloppiness or whatever, Vandy was getting it done. Ole Miss largely was not. And then they flipped a different switch in the second half. And Jackson Dart actually made a ton of plays. I think it was Mingo who ended up with like 250 yards. Like, they did a very good job because they were not able to get it really done consistently on the ground. So they take to the air and comfortably pull away from Vandy late. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, there was not much to add with the Georgia. Auburn's not a good team, and Georgia found new weapons in the backfield. Stetson Bennett had a super long run. The defense stepped up. More of what you come to expect from Georgia. So, dog's big.
Got to move on. Let's go to ACC football.
Weird day.
State, really weird day. NC State 19-17 over Florida State. North Carolina 27-24 over Miami. Pitt wins 45-29 over Virginia Tech. Izzy Abanikanda, man. Woo! 320 and 6 touchdowns. All 6 of Pitt's touchdowns coming from good Izzy. Georgia Tech wins in OT. They're now 2-0 after the firing of Jeff Collins.
Yep, almost choked that game away.
Almost choked it away. 23-20 over Duke. Clemson shakes off a little bit of a slow start, a 10-3 halftime lead, and drills Boston College 31-3. Wake Forest big over Army. Louisville won with a backup quarterback and held UVA to 6 yards on the ground. They knock off Virginia 34-17. And we can lump Notre Dame in here since they're quasi an ACC team. Notre Dame, I should have locked up the Notre Dame game because I felt pretty strongly that Notre Dame had a good chance against BYU.
What was the final line and then the final score? It was close, though, was it not? Because BYU came back.
BYU came back. They tried. 28-20 was the final. But Notre Dame, for the most part, had this game pretty well in hand. It seems like they are improving. I like Drew Pine a little bit more than I thought possible.
Oh, look at you.
He's an inspiration for those of us who have yet to break the 6-foot barrier, Dan.
Are you still holding out hope?
He's built like he could be the third host of this podcast.
Because he's right sort of in between us? It's a Goldilocks situation?
It's a bit of a Goldilocks situation.
Okay.
But he's getting more comfortable out there. He definitely gives him a spark. I don't know what it is. He's got 1 or 2 plays in him per game that he improvises and does something just like unexpected but surprisingly well. And so I can't really explain it. I can't put my finger on it. Ultimately, I don't think he's that good.
Right.
But he's getting comfortable. He produced good results yesterday in the BYU game. He's finding new receivers. He's getting more guys in the passing game involved outside of Michael Mayer. I think it's a lot of positive stuff. And BYU might not be as good as we thought, but BYU is still a pretty good football team. Like, I felt pretty good about the fact that they were able to run on BYU, that they were able to pass on BYU, that they were able to go to Vegas and beat BYU. There was a lot to like in this football game, especially the line getting better. So, yeah, they came back. BYU came back a little bit in the second half. And Notre Dame, second half under Marcus Freeman, they got to figure this out, man. I don't know what's going on there. But
all right,
all things considered, I thought a pretty successful showing on the road. Notre Dame, by the way, has Clemson on the schedule. Notre Dame's got Syracuse on the schedule. They got SC to close out the year on the schedule. So, 2 losses, not going to the playoff, but still a lot to be said for where this Notre Dame team ends up at the end of the season.
None of the teams that you just mentioned, Syracuse, USC, and Clemson, are without their own flaws, right?
No.
They're all gettable on the right day. If Notre Dame is solid, a solid team could beat any one of those teams, but a solid team could also lose to all 3 of those teams.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know what? That'd be okay.
That's fine.
That'd be okay. As long as they continue to show improvement, I'm okay with it. But
NC State, Florida State was weird.
Yeah. Really
Florida
bad
State
beat.
jumps out to a big lead. They can't do anything on offense in the second half. NC State tightens up. Devin Leary goes down hurt. There's weird field goal stuff. I hope for NC State fans in a winning effort that they can look at this game and say, winning is better than losing. Let's hit the offensive coordinator market in the offseason. Let's see who's who on monster.com who's looking for a big ACC offensive coordinator job, because I just think they are leaving a good amount on the field. And for Florida State, man, they just, over the course of 4 quarters, I mean, you're 10-2, Florida State Seminoles. Just rough stringing together quality drives on both sides of the ball. We'll leave it at that. But
yeah,
I don't know, man. They're just not a trustworthy team on any level.
They were up 17-3 at half.
They were
in this game. And if you're a Florida State fan, it's just kind of a bad beat. I mean, it's a bad beat, first off, if you're like me and you had NC State -3.
Sure.
But definitely a bad beat if you're a Noles fan, because look, they weren't like a supernova on offense in the first half. I'm not saying that, but
no.
They played well enough to win if they could hold the lead. The offense had struggles. They still make too many mistakes. They had 2 turnovers in this game. Like they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit here. And so, yeah, if you're a Florida State fan looking at this game, it feels like one that got away from you.
Yeah, it's also slow starts to halves is something that I'd like to just make a mental note of in terms of preparation, in terms of game planning. And Florida State, right? Both halves, they came out kind of flat.
Yeah.
And that to me is the issue, right? They go down like they did to Wake Forest. They go down, or they go up after a slow start in the first half, and then they come out completely flat in the second half. And you credit NC State their adjustments. It's an experienced front on defense, and NC State's field goal kicker, if I recall correctly, was absolute nails. Your
Christopher
phrase
Dunn.
of the day.
Christopher Dunn, baby.
Chris Dunn, yeah. But no, this is the winning DNA has not fully helixed in Tallahassee.
No.
North
Carolina, Miami.
Yeah.
Shout out to North Carolina for holding Miami to 5 inches per rush. I did the math.
Do you know how hard that is?
Good Lord. Good. And bear in mind, this is a game for Notre Dame when they played UNC. Notre Dame had not been able to run the football. They ran for almost 300 yards against North Carolina.
Yeah.
Still trying to kind of get their line in order. So it's not like this is a shutdown rush defense on the UNC side by any stretch. So shout out Gene Chizik. I don't know, maybe he changed something.
It's a really predictable when Miami's running, it's pretty predictable what they're doing, whoever it is. I mean, they had the turnovers, and look, you see that Miami still outgained North Carolina by a significant margin, did they not?
Yeah.
They just goal line stands. They're moving the ball pretty well through the air, if not really well through the air. And situationally, Miami's just kind of a mess. Another really slow start, if I recall correctly, for the Canes. I go back to that. That's game planning. That's preparation. And we saw it with Mario at Oregon. Bigger games, bigger opponents, 3 and out, 5 and out, whatever, to open up games. And Miami has a lot to go back to. They need an offensive line badly.
Yeah.
And they had those opportunities at the end of the game. Tyler Van Dyke throws the pick. They have the weird onside kick that seemed like it was the greatest play in the history of onside kicks. But yes, the feet
Stepped
were clearly
out
of bounds. And I saw, I don't know if it was Cam Underwood over at State of the U. Somebody said, well, look, we lost, but at least North Carolina didn't set all-time rushing records in the process, as the Heels have owned the U these last few years.
Tyler Van Dyke, by the way.
Yes.
57 attempts, almost 500 yards passing in a losing effort.
Oof.
Canes now, by the way, 2-3 for the second straight season. Meanwhile, Carolina, very quiet, 5-1.
Middle Tennessee losing emphatically, we should point out yesterday. Yeah.
All right. I don't know if you have anything else on the ACC. We can move over to the Pac-12 and close this thing out.
Good for Louisville for beating Virginia. I mean, with back, it was Brent Doman. I watched this game largely on mute. So, yeah, Clemson impressive defensively, of course, stepping up. It was relatively close at halftime. Yeah. They couldn't really get going on offense, but did a nice job. The defense led the way for a comfortable win over BC. Georgia Tech, I think worth highlighting once again. Another game, another win. Jeff Sims did kind of everything himself. I think it was McCollum who got it done out wide for for the Yellow Jackets. But
Tech's 3-3. They're 3-3 now. 2-0
Brent
since
Key
firing Jeff
making
Collins.
a case.
Yep.
That's all.
All right. Over in the Pac-12 to round this thing out, Trenton Bourguet, the former fifth-string walk-on quarterback, got the keys to the ASU offense after Emory Jones went down, and he was kind of unstoppable.
He was good.
He was kind of unstoppable as Arizona State knocks off ranked Washington 45-38. Second straight loss now for the Washington Huskies. This is a close game. There are a lot of points the full way through. Second week in a row, not only did Washington lose, but their defense struggled pretty mightily. Second week in a row also that Washington kind of put itself in a hole. So Kalen DeBoer called that stuff out in the postgame as well. Obviously, they need to do better, but kind of a surprising result here. Arizona State with a no-name quarterback putting up 45 and knocking off Washington 45-38. So that was a bit of a shocker. We had USC 30-14 over Wazoo. SC defensively looked really good in this game. They held Wazoo scoreless for the final 43 minutes of the game. They stopped them on the final 7 drives to end this game. And that was without Shane Lee, who was hurt, and Kalen Bullock, their safety, who I think went out for a targeting call at some point earlier in the game.
Okay.
So good showing for the SC defense. Not the cleanest showing for the Wazoo offense. There were some drops. Play calling was a little suspect, but 30-14 is your final there as SC wins. You could talk more about the Oregon win. We can come back to that, 49-22. I know you told me on Slack that Arizona has a low-level Mountain West front seven.
Yeah, they do.
And we can talk in a little bit more detail about that, and we'll close things out in the Pac-12 with a bit of a miracle touchdown and an improbable win for the Oregon State Beavers. Treshawn Harrison caught a 56-yard touchdown pass with only 13 seconds left.
Not a Hail Mary.
Not a Hail Mary. So here's what happened.
Not a Hail Mary. Yeah.
Here's what happened. It was one of those back shoulder throws. It was an aggressive back shoulder throw.
It was a very ambitious back shoulder
Extremely ambitious, extremely back shoulder.
At 2:30 a.m. Eastern time. Yeah.
Treshawn Harrison contorts his body in such a way that the defender didn't even know he caught it. He didn't even know it was thrown. It was that bad. And so nobody on the Clemson defense had any idea that the ball was thrown or that the guy caught it. He catches it. He contorts his body. Great catch. Turns around, runs clear down the sidelines before anyone knows he even has the ball. And before long, Oregon State dancing in the end zone. They end up winning. They also had a backup. Chance Nolan was hurt. Ben Gulbranson, did I say that correctly?
Yep.
He looked okay. It took Oregon State till about the fourth quarter to really get going on offense, but hell of a way to close this thing out, man. What a win.
It's something like 10 straight FBS losses for Stanford. It's the number somewhere in there. Just a almost idiotic play to win this game for
It was
Oregon
ridiculous.
State.
It was ridiculous.
I mean, the effort and the skill and the playmaking ability of Treshawn Harrison, who I think was a Florida State transfer. He was Willie Taggart brought him to Florida State from the Pacific Northwest, though. A terrific play.
Number
unbelievable
13 for Stanford. Whoever the defender was, I should have looked it up.
Yeah, he got embarrassed.
He had no idea what was going on.
No.
He just put his hands up like he was a scarecrow.
Yeah.
He had no concept for what was happening. And before long, Harrison was running down the sideline.
Speaking of weird-ass plays, you mentioned the fifth-string, walk-on, whatever, quarterback for ASU, another game in which Washington struggled on defense. The first game in which Michael Penix threw the ball off of his own offensive lineman's helmet, ending up in a pick six. I actually, and this is me being 100% genuine, I feel bad, even as an Oregon fan, for Washington fans, because at the time, comfortably beating Michigan State felt like an indicator of something.
No.
And it turns out it's an indicator that you are an active FBS program.
Yeah, Michigan State might be capital B bad.
Yes. So Washington has a long ways to go on defense to me after these last couple of weeks against UCLA and ASU, but whatever. Good win for ASU, which, by the way, another interim situation. I think interim coaches were possibly undefeated on the Power 5, if not G5, all FBS level yesterday with just the success of Nebraska and Georgia Tech, Arizona State, a lot of good stories there of kids coming together after their head coach being fired. Wisconsin and Jim Leonard.
Yep.
You mentioned Oregon State. We can talk about Oregon. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that does it for the Pac-12. Oregon looked strong to very strong against an Arizona team that, yes, defensively, there's a lot of work to be done. You mentioned Drew Pine's size. Drew Pine might have been playing edge rusher for Arizona yesterday in the desert. And a cool story because the receivers are very good. Jaden DeLore can make plays. They sold out that stadium, which if you've been paying attention, does not happen all that often in Tucson. And Arizona started out the game pretty well. They fumbled it deep in the red zone, and that stopped things there. But they were able to move the ball some through the air, but Oregon was generating turnovers and forcing mistakes and not allowing Arizona, really outside of, I think, one early long run for a touchdown, to do anything on the ground. And Bo Nix looked really, 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 really good.
Good Bo. You're getting good Bo.
He ran well. He threw the ball downfield. This wasn't a lot of short stuff like screens going for 80. He was throwing the ball downfield in big moments, and it worked. It was sort of it was a complete win for Oregon yesterday. They spread the ball around to different receivers and different running backs. Different guys made plays on defense. And so the game in, I guess, 2 weeks, right? Because both Oregon and UCLA have a bye this coming week. It's going to be huge. It's going to be absolutely huge. What Chip Kelly is able to do against this Oregon defense in terms of, figuring out who to pick on, and then Oregon and going straight at this UCLA defense with their rushing attack. It's going to be I'm looking forward to it immensely. A lot of narratives at play.
A lot of narratives for sure. Okay, some other action here very quickly. Cincinnati escapes USF. That was a near loss for them.
Yeah.
Coastal Carolina played in a tight one against Fun Row. Won by a 28-21 score on the road. We also had James Madison extending their unbeaten streak, 21 points in the fourth quarter as they knock off Arkansas State.
Put the Dukes in a bowl. They're not eligible to play in a bowl this year because of the reclassification rules involved with not being allowed.
Yeah, I know.
You got to earn your way in. Put the Dukes in a bowl game. They're going to win a bunch of games.
They're going to win a bunch of games. Houston.
What else stood out to you? Yeah,
Houston,
comeback.
33. Yeah, comeback. 26 points in the fourth quarter. A wild fourth quarter, by the way, featuring 38 points between Houston and Memphis. 33-32 was your final there. Do we have a Boise win over Fresno, right?
They ran the hell out of the ball.
Yeah, man.
Another down week for Fresno, unfortunately, but Boise, yes, left for, parts, left for dead, whatever. Boise State, after the non-conference portion of their schedule, have really turned it on. I don't think they've lost in the Mountain West. Is that true?
They are 3-0 in Mountain West play.
So a nice turnaround story. But speaking of which, San Jose State laying the lumber. Siobhan Cordero, Hawaii transfer, which, by the way, a lot of Hawaii transfers in the sport. But San Jose State, a very quiet 4-1, 2-0 in the Mountain West. Bad blood between Jay Norvell and Ken Wilson, which to be expected with how everything went down with Jay Norvell bringing the transfers that he brought from Nevada to Colorado State. So some bad blood at the end of that game, but Colorado State does win that one 17-14. But I always like those stories.
Love it.
The animus involved.
Oh, yeah.
Weird plays. I don't know if you saw the 92, I don't know how many yards. Was it called back? The Buffalo Bowling Green blocked field goal thing? Not blocked, but the failed fake field goal that went completely awry.
Oh my gosh.
That was fun.
That was the opposite of the holder kicker taking matters into his own hands. That was a weird setup. UTSA wins by 3 over Western Kentucky. Kind of a fun game there. And UConn. UConn wins for the second straight week.
Winning streak. We heard the reverb. The first winning streak since whoever left that reverb met his spouse. Georgia State wins their rivalry game against Georgia Southern, which is good to see because you like a back and forth there. Georgia Southern yet to win in the Sun Belt. We kind of just went over it quickly, but Wisconsin did really lay the lumber over Northwestern.
Lock of the week, baby.
Lock of the week for you. Tulane very quietly 5-1, and that Kansas State win doesn't look as bad as we mentioned for K-State because I don't know, man. Green Wave, Willie Fritz with an emphatic win over East Carolina. That was sort of wall to wall. Navy, by the way, very quietly looking competent with a comfortable win over Tulsa, which is not something I saw coming personally. Mentioned Middle Tennessee going down emphatically. That was to UAB, 41-14 final. UAB just from the onset sort of stomped them. Utah State making some noise. They beat Air Force, a kind of disastrous way to start the season. Wyoming beats New Mexico because it's New Mexico. You mentioned the Dukes of James Madison. Texas State taking down App State.
I saw
Didn't
that.
see that coming. Texas
No.
State has kind of been on the receiving end of not super good
Is that
things.
Jake Spavital?
That's Spav. UTEP goes down in a bit of a shootout to Louisiana Tech. You mentioned Coastal Carolina. San Diego State with the most San Diego State score possible, 16-14 over Hawaii. Anything else? Pat League results that you want to talk about?
No,
Ty?
I don't want to talk about Pat League.
You just
I
want to
talk-
preserve my voice.
Yeah, I want you to shut up so I can talk about next week.
Okay.
So, as luck would have it, I got my calendar mixed up. I inexplicably gave some Big 12 teams buys next week that they do not have.
Oh.
So, if you made it this far,
Lucky
and if
them.
you heard me talking about bye weeks for like TCU or Oklahoma State, just strike that, redact that from the record if you don't mind, because
Fair.
next week is shaping up to be a mammoth week.
Oh, I love that.
Mammoth week in college football. Save your voice, Dan. We're going to need it. Here's a sampling of what's to come in week 7. Penn State at Michigan. Kansas at Oklahoma, which is way more interesting than we ever thought possible. Alabama at Tennessee. Oklahoma State at TCU. NC State at Syracuse. We also have LSU at Florida, which is always kind of an interesting matchup. Clemson at Florida State. Mississippi State at Kentucky. USC at Utah. And there's much more. Those are just teams in the current top 25. Many other games here that I think are going to be of real significance in week 7. So rest up, plan accordingly. Not a lot of windows next week for opportunity, but to say the least, a good week of college football that should help us work some things out. As by the way, we've kind of reached the halfway pole in the college football season, if you can believe that.
Is there a halfway poll?
No.
Is there a poll in the middle?
There's a quarter poll.
Okay.
Now there's a halfway poll as well.
I appreciate that. Just speaking of Mammoth Weeks, just on your calendar in a few weeks, if you can carve out 5 hours in late October to get to Worcester, Mass. That's when Fordham Holy Cross is happening at Fitton Field. Can we do some dudes real quick?
We can do them. Let's do it.
dudes. Do some dudes.
What do we got?
Michael Mayer, who's probably in need of retirement from the dude list. Marvin Harrison Jr. Jason Bean, Kansas. How about that? Dude in a losing effort. Tuli Pulotu for USC was all over Washington
Better you
State
than
and
me.
Cam Ward. Quentin Johnston going over 200. Jatavian Sanders, Texas. Branson Robinson stepping up, for Georgia with some big plays. And, of course, Izzy Abanikanda for Pitt going for over 300 damn yards. Against Virginia Tech.
Can we just call him Nobody Beats the Iz?
Sure. Just call him Izzy. Just one name. Izzy. Nobody beats the Iz.
Nobody Beats the Iz. Thank you to one and all for downloading, listening, playing along at home. Again, we had a great time in New York. You left most of your voice in New York.
Yep.
We did our game show. It was great to see our Verballerhood. I will tell people now that we have another show coming up in Atlanta. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. It's about 8 weeks down the road. But we're very excited for that show. It's going to be at Terminal West. It's going to be on December, the 2nd. And we have another cool concept that we are working up for that matchup. So go on out to solidverballive.com if you're ever so inclined. I know we have a lot of people who listen in Atlanta, one of our biggest markets every year. College football, of course, very prominent in the Atlanta metro area. We would encourage you, if you're interested in seeing the show live, solidverballive.com, going out and get your tickets now. Get your tickets now because they will be gone by the time by the time our show kicks off.
And you're saying right now the entirety of the 1995 Atlanta Braves will be there telling untold stories about their World Series run. That's what you're saying?
We're going to hear a lot of weird stories about Greg Maddux being a weirdo.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm there for it.
Hell of a pitcher, kind of a weirdo.
That's great.
Dan, fun show. As always, rest your voice. Thank you to one and all for your support. Going out to verballers.com. Join our Patreon to help support the show. In the meantime, we will be back on Wednesday talking through news, we'll see how your voice does.
Yeah, that's true.
Big week ahead in week 7. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thanks again so very, very much. As always, stay solid.
Peace.